Hi, this is Sheila Bender, and I'm talking to you from my studio. And I hope that the video I make today about third person omniscient will help you make things flow. So let's start with a little example of omniscient, third person, which you all know. Mary had a little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece as white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, Mary went, Mary went. Everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. He followed her to school one day, school one day, school one day. He followed her to school one day, which was against the rule. It made the children laugh and play, laugh and play, laugh and play. It made the children laugh and play to see a lamb at school. And so the teacher turned him out, turned him out, turned him out. And so the teacher turned him out, but still he lingered near and waited patiently. You can find the rest of it, I'm sure, online. But what I'd like you to consider right now is that there is an omniscient narrator who is talking about Mary and the lamb and the teacher and the kids as if this narrator can see everybody and know what everybody's doing. And that's what we're attempting as writers when we do third person omniscient. It's a very common tactic in fiction writing, and we'll study it a little bit further by looking at 3 examples, also found online, of very short pieces that adopt this point of view. So before we do that, I'd like you to see just a little description of if you were to take this nursery rhyme and change it into the beginning of a story that will be being told by the third person omniscient narrator, it might begin like this. The day that Mary's lamb came to school is a day that everyone in town remembers clearly, but with very different opinions on the matter. For Mary, the incident had always been a source of great embarrassment. She maintains that she had no knowledge that the lamb was following her, but only her mother and her teacher believe her to be innocent. What I like to point out about this idea is that it is third person and it introduces attention. And now I'd like to show you some very skillful stories that we can find online. The first is the story The Ice Storm by Jim Hainan, who is a wonderful writer who seems to excel at these very short pieces. For years he wrote about the boys in a farming country setting. His newest book is Ordinary Sins, which is like a setting of a people watcher, maybe set in a mall, for instance, where this person can see many, many people, and in short stories, as a third person omniscient narrator, show us what people are up to, what they seem like. So in this story from the one-room schoolhouse, the story What Happened During the Ice Storm, we have Jim Hainan, I think, at his very, very best. This is from his website, but it does have some typos in it, so I hope that I don't stumble. What happened during the ice storm? One winter, there was a freezing rain. How beautiful, people said when things outside started to shine with ice. But the freezing rain kept coming. Tree branches glistened like glass, then broke like glass. Ice thickened on the windows until everything outside blurred. Farmers moved their livestock into the barns, and most animals were safe, but not the pheasants. Their eyes froze shut. Some farmers went ice skating down the gravel roads with clubs to harvest pheasants that sat helplessly in roadside ditches. The boys went out into the freezing rain to find pheasants too. They saw dark spots along a fence. Pheasants, all right. 5 or 6 of them. The boys slid their feet along slowly, trying not to break the ice that covered the snow. They slid up close to the pheasants. The pheasants pulled their heads down between their wings. They couldn't tell how easy it was to see them huddled there. The boys stood still in the icy rain. Their breath came out in slow puffs of steam. The pheasant's breath came out in quick little puffs. One lifted its head and turned it from side to side, but the pheasant was blindfolded with ice and didn't flush. The boys had not brought clubs or sacks or anything but themselves. They stood over the pheasants, turning their heads, looking at each other, each expecting the other to do something, to pounce on a pheasant or to yell bang. Things around them were shining and dripping with icy rain. The barbed wire fence, the fence posts, even the grass seeds. The grass seeds looked like yolks inside gelatin whites, and the pheasants looked like unborn birds glazed in egg white. Ice was hardening on the boys' caps and coats. Soon they would be covered with ice, too. Then one of the boys said, "Shh." He was taking off his coat, the thin layer of ice splintering in flakes as he pulled his arms from the sleeves. But the inside of the coat was dry and warm. He covered 2 of the crouching pheasants with his coat, rounding the back of it over them like a shell. The other boys did the same. They covered all the helpless pheasants, the small gray hens and the larger brown cocks. Now the boys felt the rain soaking through their shirts and freezing. They ran across the slippery fields, unsure of their footing, the ice clinging to their skin as they made their way toward the blurry lights of the house. I love this story. I love the story for what happens, which to me is an omniscient third-person narrator sees a scene and draws us close to it, feeling the boys, feeling the pheasants, feeling the ice, all against the background of adults and safe animals. Some animals are safe because they had places to be brought inside. The pheasants are not safe because the adults are probably out there with clubs and sacks bringing food home. The boys get to see something different because they don't know what to do when they're confronted with the poor and freezing pheasants, so like them as they are freezing, so helpless as they are with no clubs. So we go from a wide shot, I suppose, freezing rain, to something a little more close up, which is once we get into the roadside ditches, and then the pheasants against the fence, first seen as dark spots. And then we have the boys, we're close up on them. And then we have them seeing the pheasants with their heads under their wings, and we see that they're quiet. We hear that they're quiet. They don't do what they usually do, just as the pheasants aren't doing what they usually can do, now that their eyes are frozen shut and they can't even tell that there's danger near them. We're brought so close that the grass seeds look like yolks inside gelatin whites, and the pheasants look like unborn birds glazed in egg white. Our hearts are getting more and more tender towards these birds that are so threatened. And then one of the boys takes off his coat, and the other boys follow. They cover as many pheasants as they can, and then, finding themselves in the danger of freezing too, without coats, they make their way, even with unsure footing, not sure what they did, not sure how slippery things are, but the unsure footing toward the blurry lights of the house. Well, it's very literal. I'm sure their eyes are wet too, just as the pheasants were before they froze. But the blurry lights also seem to have an emotional content. These boys have done something extraordinary. They have felt the oneness of everybody. They have felt empathy for creatures that are threatened by the conditions, something many people see as beautiful. What's beautiful inside the beautiful is the actions of the boys, even if it's temporary and fleeting. But we know something has changed in the boys, which isn't temporary, which isn't fleeting. It's a kind of awakening. And this seems so strongly done through the third person omniscient, who could have distance from all of this, and yet by having distance bring us so very close to a new understanding, just as the boys seem to have gotten. So I always want to thank Jim Hainan for this marvelous story. When you reread it, look at how all these details are evidence that we're seeing this through the third person omniscient, and yet all of these details work towards an ending that perhaps only these details could have brought us to. Remarkable work. All right, a big breath, and we're going to move on to a story that appears on a website called 101words.com. Every story on this website, which you can sign up for and subscribe and get 101 word stories every day. This is a story that a student of mine published. It's taken from a memoir she's writing, and she reduced it to 101 words for this website. She claims that she got a lot of help from the editors, which is kind of exciting, teaching her how to do this kind of work. And she had a good experience, as did another student of mine. So I would really recommend, if you're writing short stories, that you try for the 101 words and for this website. Let's read it. You Like? By Marlene Samuels. He sat behind the steering wheel of the behemoth Ford. French Estelle sat close to him. She was the buttonhole operator at the menswear factory where they worked, her machine next to his. She preferred the zippers. His daughter sat in back. She watched his intense eyes fix on hers in the rear-view mirror, and she wondered if he suspected that she knew. The girl watched Estelle work her father's zipper. He pulled away. Estelle shrugged. then twisted round, juicy fruit gum in her hand. The girl thought of her mother in the hospital, who preferred peppermint. You like? Asked Estelle. Estelle is French, so you like is the way she might have said, might have been her lingo for inviting the girl to have some peppermint. She doesn't say, would you like? It's an eerie story. We have a he, who is the father. We have the French Estelle, who is named a couple of times. And we have a daughter. So we have three characters seen by an omniscient narrator who can see into the car and what's going on. And the daughter's thoughts are reported to us. She remembers that her mother is in the hospital and likes peppermint, which is so different than juicy fruit and so different than Estelle, who shouldn't be in the front seat next to her father, in the daughter's opinion, I'm sure. And the father is caught between the hanky-panky he does usually with Estelle and her inappropriateness before the daughter, who shouldn't have been in the car really either. So a lot can be done in just a very short amount of time, and again, the third person helps this work. It's not that all short stories are told in the third person omniscient, but this one really benefits from it because it gives a distance to the character who's really talking, who is the girl. And that distance allows her to pick out these details about Estelle and her father's eyes, and Estelle working the zipper, and Estelle preferring zippers, although she's a buttonhole operator. In the garment industry, I think that was often a very used sexual innuendo about women. The father's eyes are intense. The omniscient narrator knows that the father is pulling away, that Estelle shrugs. The daughter might be seeing all of this too, but what matters most is that her daughter saw the eyes lock in the rearview mirror. But the contrast between the girl thinking that her mother is in the hospital and would, if she were there, have preferred peppermint, contrasting that with the juicy fruit that's being offered to her, makes a very, very strong statement. And again, I think it's heightened by the third person omniscient. I'd like to share another very strong third person omniscient story. This spectacular story by the famous Flash writer Bruce Holland Rogers appeared in The Sun, as did many of his stories appear in literary magazines and Flash sites, and you can find many of them by just typing in his name, Bruce Holland Rogers. And this one is done in third person omniscient. When he was very young, he waved his arms, snapped his massive jaws, and tromped around the house so that the dishes trembled in the china cabinet. Oh, for goodness sake, his mother said, you are not a dinosaur. You are a human being. Since he was not a dinosaur, he thought for a time that he might be a pirate. Seriously, his father said to him after school one day, what do you want to be? A fireman maybe, or a policeman, or a soldier, some kind of hero? But in high school they gave him tests and told him he was good with numbers. Perhaps he'd like to be a math teacher. That was respectable. Or a tax accountant. He could make a lot of money doing that. It seemed a good idea to make money, what with falling in love and thinking about raising a family. So he became a tax accountant, even though he sometimes regretted it because it made him feel, well, small. And he felt even smaller when he was no longer a tax accountant, but a retired tax accountant. Still worse, a retired tax accountant who forgot things. He forgot to take the garbage to the curb, to take his pill, to turn his hearing aid on. Every day it seemed he forgot more things, important things, like where his children lived and which of them were married or divorced. Then one day, when he was out for a walk by the lake, he forgot what his mother had told him. He forgot that he was not a dinosaur. He stood blinking his dinosaur eyes in the bright sunlight, feeling its familiar warmth on his dinosaur skin, watching dragonflies flitting among the horsetails at the water's edge. Somebody on Goodreads has called this the best Alzheimer's story read, and perhaps that's what it is. But I think it's also a flight of fancy fiction and accomplished again very endearingly through the third person omniscient, who remembers or who can see this boy as a youth and can hear the mother's dialogue and the father's asking, and then move quickly into high school where this omniscient narrator has followed the boy and now trying to make sense of the world and what he'll be in the world, his reasons for becoming a tax accountant, hating being a retired tax accountant, and beginning to forget things until what he forgets is the most unlikely of all things, that he is not a dinosaur. It's a fun story to emulate. See what you can do with third person omniscient. It's a really, really powerful thing. Another way it helps you as a writer is if you pull back and use it, even if you're writing from your own life, you get to see more. You get to move through time differently. You get to include just the right details. Not that you can't do it through other points of view, which we'll cover in other videos, but this one can offer something different. So give it a try. Go back and look at Mary Had a Little Lamb. Go look at some other nursery rhymes you know. Take off from there. See what you can do in building a third-person omniscient narrative. Bye for now.